Today on The State of Us, why do people get hacked? And could EVs be hacked? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal, and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson. Today, research reveals that we unconsciously ignore many security warnings because of the way the warnings are designed. The good news, that can easily be fixed. So we're going to talk about why do people get hacked, right? Even those of us that supposedly are tech literate, what makes it so likely that we all now have that risk of getting hacked? Also, our brains make us vulnerable to hacking. We're going to talk about exactly how that takes place and maybe how to avoid it, as well as looking at the possibility of electric vehicles. Could they be hacked? And if so, how likely is that? What does it mean for those of us that drive electric vehicles or are thinking about purchasing one? We got a lot to talk about, Lance.
There is a lot there. Interesting for a variety of reasons, and looking forward to discussing it, especially with you being that EV owner. And it's like, what about these things that they could do to your car from all of this? And as I said to you, I think the interesting part is, I know people don't like to hear this, but this is new technology, so it needs legislation. And who do we have in the federal government making these decisions for us? Oh, yeah, those 70 and 80-year-old people that maybe don't have a lot of technology knowledge. Like, what is this TikTok thing that they're talking about now? Oh, China's involved. We got to talk about TikTok. What is TikTok? Yeah. Okay. I mean, because as you listen, if you've listened to any of that, some of the questions that these older senators are asking is like, do you really even understand what's going on? And I'm an admitted person who doesn't, right? But I'm not being asked to pass forward-thinking legislation on issues for the future. It's going to be fun for you guys. I have a feeling I'm not going to be around to have to deal with it.
You're counting on that?
Even if I am, I'm probably not driving.
Yeah.
Somebody else will be driving me.
Oh, yeah. So you'll probably have a self-driving car.
So I'll be, no, I'll be looking at Uber and saying, is that an electric car? Nope, that can be hacked. Pick me up in my big old truck, will you?
The self-driving Uber that'll come get you in your truck.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that. But I mean, it's good. It's interesting, right? It's a side of things that I'm kind of playing, I'm not really thinking it's there as a real probability, but I think it is something that needs to be looked at. And I am fearful when we're talking about technology at the age of people in Congress and their ability to handle technology.
So when we look at not just EVs, but obviously talking about what makes us as people susceptible to hackers, the Wall Street Journal had a nice piece in their cybersecurity report recently. And basically it says that security experts are always blaming employees for letting criminals into company networks. Workers don't heed warning messages on their screen. They close alerts without reading them. They fail to see the obvious signs that an email is fake. They click on attachments without giving it a second thought. Yet, the research that was conducted and published in this article shows that another culprit is to blame for the failure to heed warnings: the human brain. The peculiarities of the way our brain work bias much of our behavior, including how we respond to security warnings. So basically, a bunch of fancy researchers, Lance, spent nearly 11 years looking at the problem, and they used all kinds of brain measurement methods such as fMRIs, as well as behavioral measurement methods such as eye and mouse cursor tracking to better understand how people respond to different kinds of warnings. And basically what they discovered are 3 of the neural processes that impede our ability to respond to security warnings. The first one was one that you were very excited about. It's one we've talked on this show before. The myth of multitasking.
I've had run-ins with bosses over this one. They trying to convince me that, well, you can get this done. You can multitask and And then when I said, yeah, but when you and this was, 15, 20 years ago when this was all the rage, I said, but whenever you spend the same amount, a designated amount of time on multiple tasks, you're not doing your best job on any of them. Oh, you just don't understand. You're too old. You don't get it. And I'm like, this is like, amen. I mean, I've got some proof here. I wish I could find those people and let them know and say, hey, here you go. 20 years ago, I think I was on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're big on authoritative sources. So do you want to hear from the Harvard Business Review or the Cleveland Clinic? Because they both have information available on the myth of multitasking.
Well, to be transparent and fair, I have a family member who works for the Cleveland Clinic, so maybe we ought to go with the Harvard Business Review. So
we don't have anybody working at the Harvard Business Review right now?
Not that I'm aware of. Okay. No, I don't have any nieces or nephews. At least they haven't told me about it yet.
Based on over half a century of cognitive science and more recent studies on multitasking, the Harvard Business Review tells us we know that multitaskers do less and miss information. It takes time, an average of 15 minutes, to reorient to a primary task after a distraction such as an email. Efficiency can drop by as much as 40%. Long-term memory suffers, and creativity, a skill associated with keeping in mind multiple less common associations, is actually reduced. We have a brain with billions of neurons and many trillions of connections, but we seem incapable of doing multiple things at the same time. Sadly, multitasking does not exist, at least not as we think about it. We instead switch tasks. Our brain chooses which information to process. For example, if you listen to speech, your visual cortex becomes less active. So when you talk on the phone to a client and work on your computer at the same time, you literally hear less of what the client is saying.
See, because that just says exactly right? Well, what happens to your ability to do either task? It goes down. You don't do as well. And if you're trying to learn something, in particular, and my anecdotal case here, long-term memory suffers by almost half, 40%. So it's like, if you're trying to do one thing to get something done and you're trying to do something else to remember for a later meeting, you're not going to do a very good job on either one.
Well, Dr. Cynthia Kuba, who is a neuropsychologist at the Cleveland Clinic, says that we're really wired to be monotaskers, meaning that our brains can only focus on one task at a time. When we think we're multitasking, most often we aren't really doing two things at once. Instead, we're doing individual actions in rapid succession, or, as it's commonly known, task switching.
See, this is cool when they do studies, because now they give names to stuff that I just said, because before there was no name for it. But now that we paid millions of dollars to do these studies, we now have names for task switching, huh?
That's right.
Okay. I'll put that in my vocabulary. I'm doing a lot of task switching here.
A recent study found that just 2.5% of people are able to actually accomplish multitasking efficiently. For the rest of us, our attempts to do multiple activities at once are not actually that. Multitasking hinders your performance. Multiple studies, again from the Harvard Business Review, show that when our brain is constantly switching gears to bounce back and forth between tasks, especially when those tasks are complex and require our active attention, we become less efficient and more likely to make a mistake. You might say, well, what does any of that have to do with hacking? Well, think about it.
If things are dinging on your phone or your computer constantly, right? I mean, is that where you're going here? And
Exactly.
That's what I'm thinking on my mind.
Yep.
Being a person who really doesn't use a lot of technology, but that's what I'm envisioning, right? You have something open and things keep dinging at you. Is that where you start to let your guard down?
That is part of where it starts to come into play. And the other thing to think about is how our brains condition ourselves, right? If someone's listening to the car radio and looking for a parking space at the same time, they have a hard time paying attention to both tasks. To compensate for this, many of us will instinctively turn down the radio to avoid distraction. And that's a relatively minor case of interference, as the article refers to it.
So it helps you focus.
Yes. Listening and looking are separate mental functions, after all. So if I'm listening to music and looking for a parking space, the distraction effect isn't so bad because it's two separate mental activities. People can overcome it. Doing that, though, becomes much harder when people are trying to do two similar things at once. And the more similar the tasks are, the worse the distraction will be. So things get very tricky, for instance, when someone is poring over a spreadsheet and suddenly has to read a pop-up warning at the same time. People tend to dismiss the warning to get back to the job at hand. So the reason we're talking about multitasking and not really being able to do it is if you've ever noticed those notifications that ring in when you're doing something important, one of two things either happens. Either you pay attention to it and totally lose what you were doing on the other thing, or it's like, no, I'm busy, I'll look at that later. Because your brain is telling you, we don't have time to process this. We're not going to process it right now. We'll get to it later. Of course, the problem is that if those are important security warnings, you're just,
Yeah, you just blew them off.
You just blew them off.
Right. And then are more susceptible to being hacked.
In fact, in a test conducted online with 850 people, researchers found that displaying security messages at times of low dual task interference, such as when people had just completed watching a YouTube video or were waiting for a file to download, brought a 45% improvement in adherence to security warnings.
Okay.
So in other words, if we wait until if our computers, phones were designed to deliver us security warnings at times when we are not actively engaged with a function that requires mental attention, we are 45% more likely to heed the warning, to actually do what
almost
the warning
twice,
suggests.
Right?
Yeah. It's kind of like a young child learning when to jump into a conversation without interrupting. Software should be designed to be aware of what the user is doing before disturbing them with a warning. That obviously won't work in some cases, such as an alert about a dangerous site, which must be shown immediately. However, other security messages that aren't tied to a specific event, such as the ones that give tips about staying safe, should be delayed until more opportune times.
I mean, it sounds logical, right? But now what we're saying is we have scientific evidence to back it up. We haven't changed anything.
Well, and just because we have the evidence doesn't mean we've done anything about it, right? It's really not that advanced in terms of what our computers do today.
So what you're telling me, it is possible with today's technology to make that happen.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Because it's really...
So we just haven't?
For the most part, we just haven't.
All right.
It's really just about us using the things that we already do with computers and phones that tell those devices when we're using them versus when we're not, when we're not actively engaging with them, for those devices to decide, oh, now might be a good time. Basically, rather than the device doing it on its terms, it's going to switch and do it on your terms. It's going to wait till you're not occupied to message you or notify you about this thing.
Well, there's one about muscle memory, and I want to talk to you about that one. So,
been there, done that. Been there, done that. Let's talk about it. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. Our brains make us vulnerable to hacking. And we talked about the myth of multitasking and how interference can play a role. But been there, done that is another problem that occurs when people get used to security warnings. This is a neural process called habituation. For instance, your brain may have tuned out the sound of a fan, heater, or air conditioning unit in the room. Because the brain helpfully ignores stimuli that are constant but no longer relevant to what you are doing, this is also why people stop noticing wallpaper over time that once seemed jarring. This means that the more often you see the message that a certain piece of software needs to be updated, the less you will pay attention to it. Eventually, you may not even notice the message before you dismiss it. I don't know if this has ever happened to anybody. It has happened to me. You start up your computer, right? And all these things start loading up, and you got different things coming in and this thing's popping up. And sometimes I will have closed the thing and be like, now, what was that I just closed?
Mm-hmm.
And you actually have to consciously think, what did I just get rid of? What was that thing? And the point there is that's your brain. The other thing is multitasking, right? Conscious multitasking is not something that we do. We do multitask. Our brains multitask all the time unconsciously, right? For example, you're doing it right now because there's a pretty good chance that if you're listening to this podcast, you're also breathing.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I was thinking, right?
So
I don't know. There's some days when it's touch and go for me.
For you, might not be. It's like when you go to the doctor, man, this guy should be dead. His blood oxygen's so low. Well, I forgot to breathe,
Sorry, doc. I'm just a miracle of modern science that I can survive on less oxygen than the normal human.
But the point is that we have subconscious and automatic bodily functions, right, that our brain is executing and carrying out all the time. And in a lot of ways, what our brain is doing is it's putting something essentially on autopilot or simply just pretending that it doesn't exist in a way to keep us efficient, because our active minds can't, like if we're sitting in this room and you hear a fan running and all you can think about is that fan and the noise that it's making, that's going to make it really difficult, for example, for Lance and I to do this show. So what our brains become adept at is saying, you notice it when you first come in, if you've never been here before, but you've been here for a few minutes and your brain says, hey, that's nothing to worry about. We're basically going to just forget that even exists. And you don't even really hear it anymore.
You just move on.
Right. I mean, you're physically hearing it, but your brain subconsciously has said, we don't need that information.
But then if a bolt breaks loose and gets wrapped around in the fan and starts clacking, now you hear it because that's a change in the noise.
Something's wrong.
Right.
Yep. So it's that we're
see what I was headed towards, and maybe I would never do this.
You'd never jump the gun.
Jump the gun on you. And
it all looks the same.
Move you forward, but it's like I play a trivia game on my wife's phone, and they put the button to either advance the question or use up points to get help in the same place. It just pops up at different times in the game. And I get so mad because it's like, I don't want to spend points, but I'm so used to just hitting it to get the second opportunity that occasionally I hit it and I'm like, oh, I just lost points and I didn't want help on that one. So, I mean, there's also that physical, right? I mean, you're talking about like the white noise or whatever that's in the background, but then we also just become like react physically in the same way, to the point that to the idea of not noticing what's on the screen, right? That's where I was making that connection. Like something pops up on the screen and I don't even read it because I'm assuming what's on the screen. So I just hit the button to get rid of it. And then it does something that I didn't want it to do. I mean, I hit it for a different reason, because I didn't stop to read the screen, because my muscle memory just hits it automatically because I think I assume what's going to show up on the screen. That's what just drives me nuts.
In computing, people...
Can't we put that button somewhere else?
We can. Come
on, with computer. Can we put that somewhere else?
In computing, people get used to clicking OK or cancel to get rid of a notification. That's a pattern that Lance is describing, and we call it click to dismiss.
Oh, got a name for that too?
Eventually, people develop a muscle memory that makes them dismiss any pop-up they see without paying attention to the actual message. So warnings get closed automatically, the same as other notifications. They tested this in a separate online experiment where we compared a standard click to dismiss warning with one where people had to use an on-screen slider to respond. The warning with
I hate those. I hate swiping. That's not a normal human movement.
You're not a swiper?
I'm not at all.
Swiper, no swipe.
I'm not a good swiper. Nope. Not a good swiper at all.
Okay.
My wife says, answer the phone. I'm like, I can't because it says to slide it. I just got to do that. I'm like, I can't do that. It's not working, honey. I don't know what it is, but it's not sliding.
Well, but see,
I'll slide it across the floor so that you can answer it, but I can't slide anything on this screen. She'll say, scroll up or scroll down. And I'm like, I just lost it. I don't know where it went.
It's gone.
Yeah.
There's a good reason, though, that you have to slide to answer a phone call.
Oh, this I got to hear.
On a touchscreen.
This I got to hear.
It's for exactly this reason.
Yeah.
Because we get so used to where things are on screens, right? And tapping to execute, the concern becomes that when we hear our phone ring, we've become conditioned, right, to make a decision often before we even look at it as to whether or not we're going to answer the phone right now. So our brains already, right, it starts ringing and we're processing, who could it be? Do I need to look at this? And by the time you get it out, you may notice, and I've caught myself doing this once or twice, your hand is moving for something before you've actually decided what you're going to do. Because you have to slide to answer left or right and not just tap. This is one of those actions that requires you, because if you tap, it doesn't answer, right? And it's like, oh, well, is that what I wanted to do?
Oh, yeah, I get frustrated when I have to pick up my wife's phone. Yeah.
No, I have to slide it to answer, right? Or slide it to hang up. And because of that, it is a different action than what you do most of the time on the phone. And that requires your brain to snap into it and say, what is that what I want to do? Or am I just, about to hit something before I thought about it?
Do you remember when you had to get up out of your chair and walk to the designated space where the phone was and decide whether or not to pick it up? And when you did, you were automatically connected?
Yes.
See, okay, that makes sense to me because you're going through the steps, right? That's why my flip phone, I have to punch.
I have to punch
to get the call to come in. Right. That's why I don't slide. I don't have a phone that slides.
Well, you could slide on it, but I don't know that it would do any good. I could slide
across, but it wouldn't do any good at all. But I just, remember when on my old Western shows, they're coming back with those kind of phones. They're showing old people like me with those landlines where they're actually, and now they've even got it to where you can't hear. So it types out the message so you can talk to your grandkids because you can't hear them because your hearing aid's not turned on, but you can read the screen.
As long as you haven't forgotten where your glasses are.
They're on top of my head at all times.
At all times.
Sometimes 2 pair.
He has been known once or twice, folks, to have got caught with more than 1 pair on his head.
But no, in all seriousness, that is interesting. That is a different motion to get you to stop in air quotes and think about what you're going to do. I had not thought about that. That's an interesting idea.
To combat the problem of warnings looking similar and simply dismissing notifications, these researchers designed warnings that change their appearance each time that they're displayed, such as making the warning all red, adding an exclamation point, or zooming in or jiggling the warning. All things that would be relatively easy for any software developer to do. By varying the appearance, habituation occurred much less, and adherence improved by more than 20 percentage points, 87% compared with 64% over a 3-week trial period. So in other words, just simply by varying when, how, and what warnings look like, you will get better response. It's that same thing of if the warning shows up and looks exactly the same every time, right? Your brain
is conditioned,
is eventually going to do what it does with the fan and say,
okay,
I don't need to process this, because I've seen this before. I've seen it a lot of times before. It's not important. And even if it is important, again, you've already filed it out and said, I don't need that. So if instead of it showing up in the middle of the screen, it shows up in the top left and it's twice the size that it usually is, and it's in all red and it's, jabbing at you or something, all of a sudden, I can't ignore that because that thing, I don't know what that is, but it looks bad.
That's the same as the bolt falling through the blades of the fan.
Exactly.
It catches your attention.
Yeah, something
is different.
Something is wrong, and I don't know what it is, but I have to find out. I have to be taken away from what I'm doing. I have to shut that part down so that I can now decide what to do about this thing that's, an issue.
Okay.
Like the bolt jangling
right
in the fan. It's like, yeah, that something's wrong. I may not know how to fix it, but I know I got to do something about it. So, and that's kind of the same thinking here with the warnings, is that is how we improve that. So what about EVs, Lance? I mean, we talked about how our brains can be hacked, right? And basically the way that we get hacked more often than not is by the exploitation of our human fallacies, specifically that the people trying to protect us don't necessarily deploy warnings in ways that are conducive to get us to follow them. Good news is that is actually something that's fairly easily fixed, right? That's just developers have to make adjustments to how and when we receive warnings and what they look like. But could electric vehicles be hacked? We're going to talk about it. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. Longtime listeners of the show know that Lance is just itching to get an electric vehicle. He just cannot wait.
I want to. I mean, I really kind of want to.
But every time we get him close, then there's one of these darn articles that comes out that scares him.
The batteries are going to catch on fire. People are going to hack me. It's
bad news.
Yeah.
It's bad news. Why can't we just keep what works?
And then I can't get my 79-cent Slurpee when I get my gas, because then I wouldn't be stopping at the gas station. I can't get my beef jerky,
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, heaven forbid you don't get the Slurpee and the jerky.
And the beef jerky when I get my gas, it's like I wouldn't be able to get through the day.
Your doctor's going to have a talk to you about your
I'm not looking forward to the next visit, but that's just the way it goes.
Well, have you ever been looking forward to any visit?
To the doctor?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like the fan. You're just kind of zoning it out until it can't be ignored anymore.
The only way they get me in is when they say, well, we won't renew your medicine.
You can't have any more until we see you.
Like, that's not fair. That's a violation of the Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah.
You're supposed to take care of me.
Well, in order to take care of you, we got to see you.
I'm here. You're hearing me, aren't you? I know. You know why I jump ahead on you sometimes?
Why is that?
I'm just trying to keep you focused.
Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
I don't know if that works that way.
Because you're sitting there looking through stuff and not even paying any attention to me. So I just throw out something random to see.
Like the fan, I just kind of.
That's what you do when I talk. Yes, we know that.
Tune it out.
So I have to keep you on your toes by jumping the gun, as you said,
by switching up those warnings about where we're at.
So we've got EVs, and the question becomes, since they're run totally by compute, well, I won't say totally, right? But in the article, it was something like there are 300 chips in my truck.
A luxury internal combustion engine vehicle has about 150 electronic control units.
150, okay.
Compared to about the 3,000 chips that we're seeing in the average electric vehicle.
So almost 10 times more, right? Or not, well, yeah.
Yeah.
3 or 4 times more anyway. Won't hyperbolize too much. I get in trouble for doing that at home too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like something we should talk about.
Hyperbolization?
Yeah. Well, no, they're getting in trouble at home.
It's what?
It's just a daily
occurrence. Yeah, we don't worry about it. It's just
we don't worry about it. I'm glad we have that recorded. We can save that for future.
I think I said it yesterday. I do 6 good things and I do 1 bad thing, and we focus on the bad thing. And I'm saying I'm a +5. +5 gets me in a Hall of Fame. I mean, my wins against replacement is really high. But you have what you have then, right, are these multiple opportunities, the way I see it, correct me if I'm wrong, that there are multiple opportunities then for hacking to take place in an EV that wouldn't take place in my internal combustion. There are possibilities in both, but it seems to me like after I read the article, my understanding was you're increasing that opportunity in an EV. And even more so, what I found to be interesting was, and you do this at home, right? You do most of your charging at home.
Yes.
And how, if they can hack your home computers and you're charging at home, they could infiltrate your vehicle.
Yes.
I mean, did I understand the article?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So one of the concerns, right? I guess let's start by saying that really this isn't just about how EVs could be hacked. It's really about how any modern vehicle could be hacked. Okay. Because are there some more opportunities to try to hack an EV than there are a standard internal combustion engine vehicle? Yes. However, could you also hack an internal combustion engine vehicle? Well, a 2015 demonstration involving a Jeep Cherokee provided a real-life example of how hackers could exploit security flaws in an internet-connected car. Researchers remotely broke into the electronics of the vehicle, mind you, this was a gas-powered car, via its cellular connection and took control of its steering, accelerator, and brakes by sending commands from a laptop miles away. The driver, a reporter for Wired magazine, couldn't keep the SUV out of a ditch. The car maker subsequently recalled 1.4 million vehicles to install a software patch to fix the vulnerability. So
that's why my phone is not connected to my truck.
Doesn't mean your truck's not connected.
Oh, daggone. Okay. Thought I'd slipped one by him.
Yeah. Well, don't you have this thing called you really love listening to it, Sirius XM?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is that?
Oh, well,
maybe I need to get rid of that. I need to save money anyway. So
the point is, folks,
to your point though, it's not just EVs.
It's not just EVs. If you have a car that is connected,
you're still trying to push me to buy that EV because you're saying, listen, Lance, it's going to happen.
Right.
One way or the other.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to get hacked either way. So you might as well just embrace but one of the issues that you brought up, home chargers, what I want people to understand there is just like anything, and just like EVs, it depends on if they're connected or not. Okay. So in other words, if I had an EV, right, say that was what Chevy released, 30 years ago when they released their first EV. If I had that EV or I had Lance's truck, which one's more likely to get hacked? Lance's truck. Well, what do you mean? Well, the EV from then doesn't have any fancy computer stuff going on. There isn't a way to hack it the way that you can hack a smart internal combustion engine vehicle. So the point being, EVs do pose some inherent additional risks like charging, but the question is your charger a connected or smart, as we like to call them, charger? In the case of Brett and I, and both of the chargers that we use at our house, neither of them are smart chargers. They are simply a set of electrical components that are not connected to the internet that communicate directly, non-wirelessly with the car. So the only way that you could use one of those to hack my car, right, would be that somebody would have to physically be with the charger, open the charger, install into the charger this thing. They couldn't do any of that remotely because it's not connected to the internet. So that, I guess, is where a lot of people have smart chargers, right? Where they're connected to your home's Wi-Fi, and that then opens them up to somebody remotely accessing them. But again, that's kind of, in a lot of ways, that's a, what am I doing? Am I choosing a charger that's a smart charger or not? The other side of that is, what are companies doing to ensure compliance and regulation, which, there's more than 160,000 public chargers installed at U.S. shopping centers, highways and rest stops, business parks, and elsewhere. The 2021 Federal Infrastructure Act provides funding to help build another 500,000 more. The good thing is that act, the infrastructure bill, does require security standards for those who are going to use federal money to put these facilities in place. Because while you might say, okay, well, if I just don't have a connected charger, or even if I do have a connected charger, but it's at my home network and I have a strong network password and stuff, like I'm probably okay. I'm probably really not that at risk. That's probably true. But what about if you go out and use a public charger, right? I mean, this is one that's literally sitting out in public. So a whole other...
That everybody has access to.
That everybody has access to.
Physical access, not just computer access.
Right.
But also physical
access too. So now...
And we know how people have, like, affected at the gas pump, can put little things on there to, like, steal credit card.
Exactly.
And things like that.
Yep.
So being out in public and having physical access as well as just computer access...
opens up possibilities.
I gotcha.
So the biggest thing, I mean, I guess the takeaway from all of this is, does that mean you shouldn't get an EV or that you shouldn't buy a modern car? No, but I think it does mean that as consumers, one of the things that we should start doing is if you're going to go buy a new car, right, and you're going to a dealership, you should be asking questions about this. What security is in place? You know, how do I know I'll be safe? And if you're not going to buy that way, you're going to buy online, then be sure to reach out to the company and ask, because again, the more that we do that and the more that it's clear to companies that this is important, it'll get addressed. And the occurrences of this happening, Lance, are few and far between right now in terms of practical, you know, somebody's car getting taken over and crashing because of it. The other thing is we have to remember that, you know, hackers have to have, they don't have to, but generally they have some kind of motivation, right? So what is the motivation for taking over your car and causing you to crash?
Well, it would be a terrorist act.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
what that would realistically be.
Right.
Now, you know, disabling your car and holding it for ransom, okay, that seems more likely.
That would be another
right?
one. Sure.
And while scary and not necessarily something you want to go through, not necessarily threatening to your life.
Might make a good movie script.
Might make a good movie script, though. I suppose if they took control of your vehicle while you were in it, while you were driving, and said, pay me this much or else.
We did that, right? It was called Speed.
Yeah.
With Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves. Yeah.
Yep.
Put the bomb in there. Keep it 55 miles an hour.
Right.
Good movie.
Yep. I remember. So, Lance, why do we have this conversation today?
Well, because we work at a place called True Chat.
Okay. And I thought it was because we were going to get you to buy an EV.
Not happening yet.
Okay, but we are going to get you to cancel Sirius XM.
No, can't do that. Baseball season's coming up.
Okay. Who cares if my truck gets hacked?
That's right.
I'll die happy.
Exactly. But we have a mission here at True Chat, and that is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we've done that again today, I think. You need to let us know. Email us at podcast@thestateofus.org. But if you talk to your family and friends and they say it sounds like an interesting show and they'd like to listen to it, then they can join us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us releases new episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the mornings. Those same episodes can be heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States. For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.